Well, welcome back to Pastors on Porn. And this is the podcast where we deal with clergy issues around compulsive sexual behaviors, in particular porn, but not exclusive to it. And one of the things that I love to do is connect with pastors, having been a 30-year pastor. And again, I want to just encourage you, if you want to connect with me, my email is bandofbrothers.care at gmail.com. And in particular, we're always starting new groups for pastors. We have maybe one spot left for a pastor on Monday at 4:45 p.m. Pacific time. I like to limit the group to 5 pastors, so we might have one more spot available. But if you're a pastor and you want to get into a connected group, a safe group where you can talk about your issues and grow with a group of other guys, please get a hold of me. Well, today I am thrilled to have a guy that I wish I had known 10 years ago. He's the author of a book that I wish I had read 10 years ago. And Mark Denison, welcome to the podcast.
Vern, I'm thrilled to be here. Thanks for having me.
Well, Mark has written a book called Broken Vessels. And the byline of that book is Restoring Broken Pastors for Kingdom Use. And again, it is really a book that I wish I had read and had 10 years ago. Mark, I felt like I've had to stumble into some of the same conclusions that you've come into. I don't know if that makes, great minds think alike or average minds think alike, but why did you write the book, Mark?
I wrote the book because I am a pastor like you, pastored churches in Texas for over 30 years. And so that's part of my life. And then addiction is part of my life.
Yeah.
So we launched our ministry 5 years ago and focused on sex addicts of all stripes. But through the process of doing that, I have attracted a lot of pastors to our ministry. I do 8 recovery groups every week. 2 of those are just for pastors,
Yeah.
which makes sense because of my background. And so as I've come to learn some of their stories, and a lot of them wanted to share their story, God had put it on my heart to let my problem become my platform and to especially connect with other pastors since that was my background. We know statistically that 37% of pastors are struggling with pornography. It's one of the highest professions that struggle in this area. So that being my own background and knowing that there are so many other pastors out there that have similar struggles, it just made sense to write something, do some study, provide some insight to build that bridge of healing and recovery and hope to men that I can connect with best because of my own background. So out of that came this book where we give principles for recovery and also actually tell the stories of 17 pastors in recovery that were brave enough to give their stories, not with their names, but to give their stories. So it comes out of my own past, my own experience.
Well, let's just talk about a little bit about that, because I want to ask you a question about how porn got embedded in your life. And I just want to use a quick analogy. Up here in Canada, I don't know what it's like in Florida where you're at. Well, like I like creek fishing, for example, and we're not supposed to use barbs on our hooks. We're supposed to use barbless hooks because when you try to get the hook out of the fish, it rips the mouth out, and it's supposed to be a sport with barbless hooks. And where I'm going with that is I read your story, and one of the things I so identified in the book is I hear in your story a person that porn got deeply embedded in your life, and your journey to try to come out of that is it's an arduous journey. And I so identified with that you experienced porn as a barbed hook and it got deeply embedded in your life. Would you just share a little bit about that? Because I felt such a resonance as I was hearing some of that struggles as you, talked a little bit about your growing up and how that became such a big issue in your life.
Well, I believe, and I think studies back this up, that in the root of all of this, for all of us, there are 3 things. There's isolation, there's abuse, and there's trauma. Now, I experienced all 3 of those as a child, and that led me into any porn addiction or sex addiction is an intimacy disorder. And that's what I had as a child. There was parental neglect on the part of my parents, a lack of emotional support, emotional engagement, relational engagement, major speech impediment. My legs did not develop properly as a child, so I had to wear these painful braces for the first few years of my life. I'm fine now, but growing up, I was way behind. I was legally blind when I was 8.
Oh my.
And so I had a lot of dysfunction, a lot of challenges. And so I looked in all the wrong places. And as you know, pornography and sexual addictions, they're always progressive. And so for me, what began rather innocuously, as it
Hmm.
seems to most guys who struggle with pornography, they have a little bit here, a little bit there, grew. And it went way beyond that into spending tens of thousands of dollars, meeting people that I had no business meeting,
Hmm.
going places I had no business going. And so it grew, and the tentacles spread
Yep.
in incredible ways I never would have seen coming. So because this is a progressive disorder coming from an intimacy disorder, which was at the root of my past.
Yeah, and I hear your story around, for example, the number of 12 steps groups you've gone to. Uh, I so identified with it because it was like, some guys would go, well, I think I struggle with porn. And then they describe it and you go, you know what? I really don't think you struggle with porn. Like I struggle with, like, it's at times it feels like embedded in the marrow of my bones. And you describe in your book the sheer number of 12 steps groups you've been at, the sheer amount of work you've done to uncover, to walk through, to remove the insidious impacts on your life. And I just felt like you were such a safe guy reading your story
Mm-hmm.
and then listening to the other guys' stories in your book, because I'm going, I identify this is this has been a lifelong, life impacting struggle that
Yes.
I've had. And so thank you for just the vulnerability
Yeah.
of that.
From the time I was probably early 20s, I would say, until I was 53, I'm 62 now.
Mhm.
I never went a month clean.
Yep.
No, no, I never had 26 days was the most I ever had. So I would go to 12-step meetings. And I still go. I go
Hmm.
to
Yep.
12-step meetings every week now. And I'm not saying they're perfect. They're
Yeah. Fair
spiritual
enough.
programs. They're not Christ-centered, and that's why I
Hmm.
started my own groups that are Christ-centered.
Yep.
But there is still recovery there, and there's still hope there. And I happen to think the 12 steps are biblically based. They actually come out of the Oxford movement,
Hmm.
1930s. We could talk about that another time. But for me, the struggle of finding sobriety was a lifelong struggle. And what I tell guys all the time is that if you're 90% in, you're 100% out. And that was
Hmm.
me. I wanted to have it both ways. I wanted
Hmm.
to have the secret life over here that wasn't hurting anybody, wasn't harming anyone except me. No one knew about it, so did it really matter? And then over here, shine on Sunday, do all the right things there, because the grip of it was just so, as you said, insidious. 60% of porn addicts also have dual addictions.
Right.
But you can ask any of them that have the addiction of alcohol or drugs or whatever else it might be. There's 166 addictions. And they will always tell you that the porn addiction, the sex addiction is the strongest. And that's because when God created sex, he said, what? It is good.
Yep.
He didn't say when God created opioids, it was good. He
Yep.
said when God created sex. So there's that natural sex drive that's still there, even for a recovering addict.
And I've heard that from guys, NA guys and different guys who've come out of those, and they say, no, porn feels completely different. It's, in terms of that. Well, and because on this podcast, I really want to delve into issues, particularly around Christian ministry and clergy, you know, answer me this. And I've attempted to answer this, and I love the way you put it in the book. Why you feel pastors are seemingly modern day pastors, people that are in the clergy today or on staff in churches or nonprofit or mission organizations, why we seemingly seem to be set up in our roles for a vulnerability around things like porn. It just seems like there's some things that are there's a current running against us that leave us marks for this addiction. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, yeah, I'll share some of that, and man, you could not be more accurate. It is amazing to me how many pastors and guys in ministry are reaching out to me all the time, in part because they are struggling more than others, and
Mhm.
also because there's a God consciousness within them that says this isn't right. I think, and I share this in the book, that there's 5 or 6 reasons that pastors struggle in this area more than most. One is that they have an identity that's tied up in what they do.
Mhm.
They are pastor. People call them pastor. No one says to their plumber, they don't call them plumber. They don't
Right.
call them lawyer. They call you pastor. So our identity is in what we do rather than who we are. And that sets us up for perfectionism, which sets us up for failure. Also, pastors struggle with community because we don't feel that we have anyone who's safe
Mhm.
because we usually don't. And so we can't, a pastor can't go to someone in the church and say, I just want you to know I'm struggling with pornography and usually keep his job. School teacher can do that. The mechanic can do that. The
Right.
electrician can do that. So we lack community. Also, pastors struggle with boundaries. 60% of the volunteers in churches are women.
Mhm.
And so there are women the pastor works with on different committees, different projects. And unless it's a really large church, it's really hard to avoid those moments where there's a
Mhm.
woman in the office or they're talking on the phone and there's some times where they just have to have some interaction. And so if they're not careful with their boundaries, then it becomes a very slippery slope. A fourth factor that I think makes pastors really vulnerable is a lack of accountability. I say I'm going to the hospital, but who
Yep.
knows? You know,
Right.
I've got this petty cash that I'm going to give to some homeless guy, but does he really? He's not going to give me a receipt.
Right.
I'm on the phone with a woman, but what are we really talking about? I'm at a convention. Who knows what I'm really doing there? Another issue is psychological, and that
Hmm.
is that as pastors, we are so geared up, performance based. We want to hear that we did a good job on Sunday. And if we don't hear that, we've got to self medicate some other way. And we hear the criticism, but we don't always
Yeah.
hear the positives. And so psychologically, that really weighs on us. And the last factor, I think, is spiritual. There's a sense of that we're a spiritual Superman. I'm not
Mhm.
vulnerable. I'm impenetrable. God has protected me for years, as He did for me. I mean, I went all these years, never got discovered. So I'm like,
Yep.
God's got this. I don't have to worry about this. You
Right.
know, spiritually, I'm up here someplace. And even if I am living a double life, God's going to protect me because I'm just different. And so there are just a lot of reasons that we're just vulnerable, have a huge target on us. And the demons know, the enemy knows, Satan knows, he
Mhm.
can bring the pastor down, he can bring the church down. So we are very vulnerable. If we don't recognize that, we're going to be in trouble.
But Mark, if you stumbled on this podcast, you might be sitting going, but Mark, pastors are supposed to love God. Like you still might be incredible. If you're not a pastor, how is it that you who are supposed to love God could could still be dabbling in this, despite everything you've just said? You just given us five or six rationalizations. I'm playing devil's advocate here, for this.
No,
But doggone it, aren't you guys supposed to be the ones who love God? How is it possible that this continues when you say you love God?
the first book I wrote on addiction is the one I'm holding right here called Porn in the Pew.
Yep.
And I talk about how rampant pornography is in the pew
Mm-hmm.
and address that exact question you just said. Romans 7, Paul said, I know what I'm supposed to be doing. And he was a
Right.
mature Christian at this point. I know what I'm supposed to do, but I find myself not doing it. I know what I shouldn't do. I find myself doing it. Oh, wretched man that I am.
Right.
St. Augustine was asked one time, why did Paul sin so much? Was it because he was such a bad sinner? And Augustine said, no, it's because he was such a good saint. It was the fact that he wrestled with it that he was willing to admit. We all wrestle with this. And so it is one thing to say, I love God, which is a spiritual thing, and then to wrestle with pornography, which is usually not a spiritual thing, although there's a component to it,
Yep.
under especially. But coming out of abuse, coming out of isolation, coming out of trauma, if someone was smacked in the face and they started to bleed, we wouldn't blame them for not loving God enough
Right.
to have this injury. No one asked for this addiction. And it's, I mean, I've never known anyone who said, I'm really happy that I'm a sex addict or porn addict. And so, and that was a problem for me for so many years. That's why I didn't get help because I'm thinking if I just love God more, if I just pray more, if I just repent
Right.
more. But I was looking for a spiritual solution to things that had a deeper problem.
Hmm. And that's one of the things I love about your book is you're not you really take a holistic approach. You're not, well, all you need to do is know 1 Corinthians 10:13, or all you need to do is, so your book Porn in the Pew, what I hear you saying is exactly those same dynamics are in play with porn in the pulpit as they are with porn in the pew. It really is the same.
Absolutely.
There's
Yeah,
so
which is why when I work with ministries, I do this all the time, where there's someone that works there that's struggling in this area. I always encourage them to work redemptively
right.
and with whoever has fallen, whoever's struggling. Doesn't mean they'll necessarily return to their original position, depending on
Mhm.
what the circumstances are. But I believe God uses us not despite this problem, but because of it. And so the guy that's in the pulpit is no different than the person that's in the pew. Whatever's in his past, his background, the
Yep.
baggage, things that put him here. The interesting revelation that I had was one night it occurred to me. I don't know why I never thought of this before. I felt so much shame, which is never from God. I
Mhm.
felt so much shame that I had been a pastor all these years, and I was discovered, and people found out, and
Mhm.
that's a bad mark for the church, and you know how horrible
Mhm.
all that was. And yet God was saying to me, "Listen, I knew this was coming when I called you in the first place.
Hmm.
I didn't call you to be a pastor and then get blindsided by this. You know, the Father's not up in heaven saying to the Holy Spirit and to the Son, whoa, I didn't see this coming.
Right.
God took a guy like you and me and said, there's a guy that's going to be a mess. He's going to mess things up.
Mhm.
He's not going to respond to this addiction as appropriately and quickly as he should. He's going to make a mess of things. And that is the guy that I'm going to use to pastor these churches. That's amazing to me. And
Absolutely.
so my sin is never greater than God's grace.
I boy, that I'm going to spend some time. That is really helpful. Let's talk a little bit from a church standpoint. Then I want to ask you a proactive question, and then we'll deal with a reactive question. You have this great quote in the book. Churches prepare for the 0.7 of 1% of their people who need a wheelchair ramp,
Mm-hmm.
but are unprepared for the 37% and higher of their pastors and staff who will struggle with porn. It's such a great example. And if you're an elder, you're somebody who's a board member, you're somebody who's trying to create a proactive scenario in your church. Let's speak proactively. What should churches and boards do? Let's say they have no idea if any of their pastors are struggling or not. I mean, they know the stats that you mentioned. Let's talk proactive first. What do you think smart churches best practices would be to be uh, thinking about this area in
Great
advance?
question. Great question. Well, we know that to go back to the wheelchair ramp illustration, 98% of churches have those.
Mm-hmm.
Almost, I mean, they all should, because every now and then someone needs it.
Yep.
And yet only 7% of churches have anything to offer
Right.
for guys that struggle in this area. And that's based on their own reporting. And a lot of them
Yep.
are probably making that up. Number one is the pastor has to have the freedom to walk with a limp.
Mm.
Doesn't mean he has to tell everybody all the stuff, the details of his struggles, but the guy standing up there on Sunday needs to frequently confessionally preach and say, I'm in this thing with you. Again, I'm not saying it's wise for him to go into all the detail,
Yep.
but the pastor has to feel safe to say, I struggle like other men struggle. And
That,
I
that
want you to
that's a
come.
that's a
Go ahead.
different definition of the word confessional churches. I like that.
Yeah, yeah, yes, exactly. And it's important because we're not going to feel safe in the pew until the pastor's been vulnerable in the pulpit.
Mhm.
And then there has to be a safe landing place for people in the church. Struggles and addiction need to be normalized in the
Mhm.
vocabulary, the vernacular of the church. I was in a mega church in Houston a few years ago. The pastor was a supporter of our ministry, and he said, we're launching a sexual recovery ministry, and I'd like for you to be here Sunday if you can and tell me how you think we do. So that Sunday, 7,000 people there. And the pastor said in room 402 or whatever in the back,
Mhm.
we're going to start a group for those that struggle with porn addiction. If that's you, come to the room after the service. We've got a leader and we'll give you information. Not one person went out of 7,000
Gee,
because they were
surprise.
saying, exactly, they're saying, go be different from everyone else.
Mhm.
We won't talk about it in here. We're going to talk about it over there in the corner someplace.
Hmm.
And everyone will walk by and wave at you and see the weirdos in the corner. I mean, that's just no good.
Yeah.
As opposed to preaching on it on Sundays, normalizing it, offer groups, offer resources, maybe one Sunday a year, just talk about this one topic.
Yep.
and make it very clear to people that we're starting groups, we're making this something we're going to talk about very openly. Because when we know that 64% of men in America are looking at porn every week, and 62% of men in the church are doing it, basically the same number, that's 5 out of 8,
Yep.
then we know the problem. There's enough of it that we need to talk about it. And so we've got to normalize the discussion so people feel like it's safe.
So what about in particular, and that's super helpful for churches that are looking at the posture and the culture of the church as a whole. And I like that because it should not be separated out from the culture of the clergy. What would you do specifically to create that environment for clergy? I mean, we got big churches with staffs of 30, 40, 50 people. We have, solo pastor church, but what would you do to create that culture for clergy?
Uh,
Particularly.
well, there's a model for this that I think is doing it really well, and I won't name the church because I don't have the pastor's permission to do that.
Yep.
But what he has done is had me come in
Mm-hmm.
and speak with their entire staff
Mm-hmm.
and let them know that I'm a resource for them.
Okay.
I'm not there on Sundays.
Mm-hmm.
I speak there occasionally, and I just talked to the pastor yesterday, and we stay very well connected. But currently, I'm working with 3 or 4 other pastors on staff in a very, very large church because the pastor has said to them, I don't need to know your stuff, but someone does.
Yeah.
And as long as you not cross the lines of children or affairs within the church, things like that, I'm not going to know about your struggle unless you want to come and tell me, but someone needs to know. So we're going to provide a resource for you.
Hmm.
I think that's a really good place to start, is
Right.
to have someone who knows what they're doing be a contact person for them that they can feel safe with. Beyond that, to just make it really clear to those guys that we are a redemptive type church
Hmm.
and we want to provide for you, whether it's therapy, counseling, other resources. But it's really good to have someone like you or me on speed dial where they can say,
Hmm.
here's a guy that can help you. He's
Yep.
an expert in this field. He's been through this. He's a safe place. But it's really helpful if they've actually brought you into the church where the staff meets this guy first so they can already establish a continuity in a relationship.
Absolutely. Okay, now let's play a worst case scenario here. That was a proactive. Let's talk
Mhm.
reactively. It's not uncommon for all of a sudden for a church to find out that somebody who's on staff, from senior pastor down, the revelation comes out that that pastor's been struggling with compulsive sexual behaviors or porn or something, and maybe you get a call or somebody. Let's talk a little bit about best practices when it becomes known. The secretary calls the pastor and say, "Hey, somebody's been on this porn website," or
Mhm.
whatever those things are. Talk to me a little bit about what you feel best practices would be in light of the shenanigans of an individual pastor coming to light.
I would say one size does not fit all
Mm-hmm.
because each church's culture, denominational background, doctrines, heritage are going to dictate a lot of this.
Yep.
There's just going to be some are a little more grace oriented, not saying it's right or wrong, that's just
Right.
where they are. And that tends to be the more contemporary, the newer churches, younger pastors. So they have to define that for themselves. It's really good if there is a proactive stance where they've written a handbook ahead of time that says this is
Mm-hmm.
how we respond so that no one can say, well, why did you do it that way? Because they've already agreed to it. But a couple of principles that I think are in play all the time. One is to separate forgiveness from restoration.
Okay.
When a pastor falls, forgiveness is not an option. We have to forgive him, no question.
Right.
But that doesn't mean we have to restore him to his position. We want to get him all the help in the world. That doesn't mean he necessarily returns to the position. That's just an overriding principle that we need to understand. We need to take that person, put them on a program of personal restoration before we worry about professional restoration. We want to get him in a good place.
Right.
So, generally speaking, what I recommend to churches is that they take this individual and put them on a 90-day leave of absence with pay.
Mm-hmm.
And this sounds self-seeking, and I don't mean for it to, but I've developed a program around this book, a 90-day recovery guide,
Okay.
and it's 90 days because it takes about 90 days to reset, rewire the brain with the dopamine
Mm-hmm.
issues and the neuroscience and neural pathways and all of that. And so take this guy and get him away from the pressure cooker of
Mhm.
day-to-day ministry and say, we're going to focus on you. You're what matters. Your job doesn't matter right now. You're what matters. And get him in some kind of program, whether it's mine or something else, and go through a program with a mentor, a coach, a therapist, someone who knows what he's doing. And during that period of time, let that guy go to this man's supervisor and give him updates on how he's doing in this program.
Okay.
Because I think that matters more about what you're going to do with him than the initial discovery. So there has to be that
Right.
process. Depending on what it is. If we
Sure.
find out the man has been looking at pornography, I think he can come back from that. If he's had an affair with someone within the church, that's going to create a dilemma that's pretty hard to come back from. So it depends on the circumstances, but um, he has to be put into some sort of a restorative
Right.
program because he matters more than his position does.
Yeah. And that's really what came out in your book. There is always a redemptive theme, not a punitive theme that comes out of that. Not saying that
Yes,
necessarily a person's restored. And you're right, one size doesn't fit all. And it depends a lot also on the posture and the response of the person who's been, you know, discovered, right? In
great
terms of
point.
that,
Great point. Yes.
as part of that. Well, Mark, I so appreciate just a couple other things I want to throw by you. Number one, how do people? Well, no, let's do this. I want to test a bit of your prophetic insight here in my circle. So now, this coming weekend, you are going to a football game on Monday night between my Dallas Cowboys. It's the first playoff game and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. It's close to you. You're going to be at the game. And by the time that this comes on, we might know the score. So we're going to be able to test your veracity here. So I want you to give me your insight on who's going to come away going to the next round on that game.
The Cowboys will win 31-27.
Okay. See when I heard that you were going to the game and you weren't going for Tom Brady, that would have been a very short interview, so we,
Understand.
we would have,
Brady's the greatest player there ever was, no
yes.
question.
Yeah.
But he's not the best version of himself. I
Right.
think the Cowboys got lax late in the year. Last
Yeah.
4 or 5 games, they were not who they were earlier, nor did they need to be.
Yeah.
I think their defensive line will dominate an injury-prone offensive line for Tampa
Yep.
Bay. I think that Brady's going to have an interception. I think Dallas will stop their running game, and when they do that, they can. And I think that their dual threat of running backs will do enough to free up the play action pass for Prescott. I
Oh my
think that
goodness.
CC Lamb is going to catch 120 yards worth of passes and 2 touchdowns. Dallas has a better kicking game. The fans will be neutralized because 40% of the people there will be rooting for Dallas. The weather's going to be good. It's going to be in the
Yep.
upper 50s, low 60s. That won't be a factor. And so Dallas should win this game.
you know, any of the listeners go, this is why me getting to know Mark is like catnip. This I really, even though you're not a true Cowboys fan, but I so appreciate that. Mark, tell us how people can get a hold of you, how they can connect with you in your ministry. They can buy the book. I really encourage you, folks. I wish I'd had this book 10 years ago. It's been super helpful. I've read it from cover to cover. I'm now working through the stories of the pastors at the end. Give us an idea of how to connect with you.
Absolutely. Our website, there'sstillhope.org. Name of the
Okay.
ministry is There's Still Hope because we always believe there's still hope for everybody.
Yep.
So without an apostrophe, just the words there'sstillhope.org. And just as a little entry, since you brought up football, a football Hall of Famer and
Mm-hmm.
former quarterback is on our website who endorses
Mm-hmm.
our ministry.
Okay.
Everyone out there will know this guy.
Yep.
And so, yeah, there'sstillhope.org. My email address is mark at there'sstillhope.org. And my cell number, don't mind giving that out, it's 941 526 4700.
All right.
941 526 4700. And I respond to people as quickly as I can. We have a 90-day recovery program. I do 8 freedom groups every week. Would love to have the guys check that out and be a part of what we do. Anything we can do to help, we're here to do that,
Absolutely.
especially for pastors.
Yeah. Mark, it's been an honor to hang out. Enjoy the football game this weekend. And again, thanks for being on Pastors on Porn.
Vern, it's been an honor, and we'll be rooting for the Cowboys for you.
Yes. All right.
All
See you guys
right.
next week.